The fabled Appalachian Mountains occupy a unique place in the story of our planet. Hidden in these rocks is dramatic evidence that shows how titanic forces drove the continents across the planet, colliding and reshaping our world. Did you know that the Appalachians have given science important clues toward unraveling the mysteries of continental collisions? Or that it's this same history that's left the region a wealth of coal? Did you know that our Appalachian region hides a band of deadly fault lines that could reveal themselves as city-shattering earthquakes? Scientists are seeking answers to Earth's ancient mysteries as they set out on a geologic journey to the heart of the Appalachians. Throughout its age-long journey, our planet has been shaped and reshaped. For those who can read what is written in the landscape, the complex forms of the Appalachian Range bear witness to that tale. Stretching from Newfoundland in the north to Alabama in the south, the rolling green mountains of the Appalachians that we see today are only a memory of the towering peaks as tall as the Andes that dominated this landscape 300 million years ago. Today, as in the past, the Appalachian Range continues to offer scientists new clues to some of geology's deepest mysteries. The latest scientific instruments and advances in geologic theory let us look at old evidence with new eyes. James Hibbard teaches at North Carolina State University. His professional life has been dedicated to understanding the Appalachians, from Newfoundland to Tennessee.
The Appalachian mountain chain is probably one of the most elegant on Earth because it preserves this unusual curvature that you see here down through Tennessee, coming up into Virginia, into Pennsylvania, going up into New England and into Gaspé, and then on to Newfoundland.
James holds in his hands the fruits of 5 years of research, a remarkably detailed geological map of the entire range.
In looking at this lithotectonic map, we can see approximately 300 million years of Appalachian history laid out in front of us. The different units shown by the different colors are different pieces of the puzzle. And by knowing the ages of those pieces of the puzzle and the environments in which they formed, we can piece together the history of the mountain range.
Hey Matt, how you doing? Just giving you a call to make sure you're all set for tomorrow. Just checking over the weather forecast here. It looks like the temperature's not going to be too bad, but it's going to be pretty humid and probably a good chance of showers. So you might want to bring your rain gear along.
Having explored the Appalachians from end to end, James Hibbard has come to the conclusion that there is something amiss with the current theories of how the mountain belt was formed.
Our work in North Carolina has been concentrated in this area here, and you can see the samples we've already collected shown in blue that are part of our study. The sample that we're going to collect is shown here in green, and we want to collect this sample to get a precise age on it.
The precise dating of these rocks is important because James wants to compare them with samples found in Newfoundland at the northernmost limit of the Appalachians. At stake is our understanding of how the continent was shaped. The geology books say that a single microcontinent slowly smashed into North America some 400 million years ago. leaving its mark on Newfoundland to the north and as far south as Carolina. But James is convinced there were collisions with two microcontinents, Appelacia in the north and Carolina in the south. To test this hypothesis, James will compare and date rock samples from both sites. This specialized laser will allow him to determine whether they are the remnants of a single collision or separate events. The key to dating the samples is the presence of zircons. Embedded in some rocks, these tiny crystals play a key role in radioactive dating techniques. The quest will begin in North Carolina.
This project really started back when I started working on Carolina. I decided to take all of the known data and compile it just to learn as much as I could about the area. And as I started looking through the data, I started noticing that it really wasn't that similar to Appelacia. I had worked in Newfoundland and I knew something about Appelacia, and I started seeing differences between the two in terms of fossils and isotopic signatures and just the sequence of events and when deformation took place. Whoa. Chris was right about this one. Look at that boulder there. Holy crap.
Gigantic.
Yeah.
Wow.
We have our free choice of gabbro.
On the field
Anyway.
there.
Look at this. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in the Piedmont.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Hey, can you put this in your pack?
Only if you carry it.
Yeah, I think we might want to try and get a sample from some layers that have a leucocratic layer, a light feldspathic layer like this in there, because that's where the zircon might be hiding, if there is any zircon in this rock. We're expecting the data from all our samples collected to show that our hypothesis is correct. And the reason I say this is because all our data sets are pointing to Carolina being different than Appelacia. The isotopic studies we've made, the geochronological studies, including the field work here.
James's search for the next clue takes him from Carolina far to the north and the rocky coast of Newfoundland. This is the northern tip of Appalachia. It's here that James hopes to find the final piece of evidence that will help him rewrite the geology textbooks. He hopes that comparing the zircons in the sample from Carolina with the sample from Newfoundland will reveal whether there was more than one continent and more than one collision that formed the Appalachians. James won't be working alone. On this trip, his old friend Kees van Staal of the Geological Survey of Canada is lending him a hand to gather the rest of the samples he needs to test the theory.
Okay, look at those rocks. They are really looking good.
Unlike further south, here the rock isn't covered by vegetation.
Ah, this is really good. Lots of
Look at
epidotes.
those, yeah.
Chert.
You got the fine laminated epidote layers in there, and
Yeah, chert.
chert, and a few clasts
Yeah.
through here.
So that could easily be a volcanic rock.
Yeah, I think there's
High
no.
strength.
I don't think many people would argue strongly against that. All right, here we go. Ah, here's some good stuff.
Yeah, look at these faults. They are
Yeah.
really amazing. Very good.
Holy crow, look at this guy right
Yeah.
here.
No, look at these.
Through there, and then it's refolded by this right here.
Sorry.
The late crenulation comes through. You have essentially the history of Appalachian events in this one outcrop
Yeah, this.
with multiple phases.
Now, if you could date the various events in a really nice way, then you would know exactly when and how and what happened.
Yeah.
That's the next challenge. All right, let's go on.
Newfoundland presents geologists was some of the clearest evidence of the Appalachian collisions. To the west are very old rocks from the earliest mountain building events, left welded to the continent. These formations bear the evidence of the intense heat and pressure of some ancient cataclysm.
Newfoundland is just one of the best places to understand the Appalachians. One, because you have such superb exposure. I mean, just look around you here in the harbor and you'll see bedrock everywhere.
People always think is that once you have looked at rocks, you have mapped them, that's the end of story. But that's completely wrong, because we have a new concept in geology, new ideas. We have to go back to the rocks to look at them again with new eyes to see what they have to tell us, because we miss a lot. So geology is a continuous process of going back to these rocks and extracting the information which is stored in them.
Though he's been studying this same rock for 40 years, James now heads to the lab where, thanks to new laser technology, he's able to look at it in an entirely new way.
We'll break it up into small gravel-sized pieces, put it in a box, and grind it up even to finer pieces and extract the zircons out of it. And from those zircons, we'll get an age date on that gabbro.
There's a hint of some older stuff in here, but it's definitely not pre-620 because we're getting younger grains in there.
That's only like 1 or 2 zircons at most, huh?
Yeah, there is something in here. But then again, this is an early Cambrian.
550, 540.
Yeah.
I thought it was supposed to be the latest pre-Cambrian.
No, this is 2, 4. There's 8. There's 9 in that.
The difference in the zircons in the two samples confirms that they were formed in 2 collisions separated by 10 million years. James Hibbard has just written a new chapter in our understanding of the history of our planet.
What a great day to be in the mountains.
Geologist
Nice and clean.
paradise for sure.
Geologist Nick Isles and James have set out to re-examine some of the clues to Appalachia's half-billion-year-long history, and even of the mountains that were already old when Appalachia was formed.
The rocks we're driving across have a history of their own. They record an older history of mountain building, one that goes back to 1.0 to 1.2 billion years ago.
In Virginia's Shenandoah National Park, Nick and James meet up with geologist and park ranger Sally Hurlbert.
So this is a really fascinating place to come for geology, isn't it? Because of this big story.
Exactly, and I like people to imagine what would it have been like had we been standing here 300 million years ago. These are big, beautiful mountains now, but they would have been 5 times higher. And we're standing nearby one of the highest peaks in Shenandoah National Park, which is 4,050 feet. Well, back 300 million years ago, maybe it would have been as high as Mount Everest. And if we had decided to try the trek and climb over these mountains, on the other side, we could have walked all the way to Africa.
As Africa and North America collided, ancient oceans vanished and new mountain ranges arose. The separation of these continents left a piece of Africa behind to form part of North America's new northeastern coast.
Liken it to a bulldozer, pushing a pile of snow in front of it, where Africa is the blade of the bulldozer. And this is the North American continent. All the material on top of it got pushed out ahead, and the basement here that we're standing on was pushed up behind that and just rammed it up on the continent.
And all the ridges we see from here all the way through West Virginia are folds, big giant folds in the earth of the crust that was thrust up and compressed during that time.
James Hibbard's research is based on generations of previous work. He's following in the footsteps of many earlier scientists, like the great Canadian geologist William Logan, who was among the first to turn a scientific eye to the geology of the region. At the very northern limit of the Appalachians, Logan discovered a long fault that now bears his name. Logan's line marks the separation between undisturbed rocks to the north and the folded strata of Appalachia to the south. Logan's observations in the 1860s would prove critical 100 years later in helping to establish the revolutionary idea of moving continents. According to this theory of plate tectonics, extraordinary energies from the planet's core cause the plates of crust that carry the continents to move, to drift, to collide, and to transform the Earth. Over billions of years, oceans are formed and later close. Giant valleys appear, rivers are born, and majestic mountain chains are thrust up only to be worn down again.
I think one of the harder things to fathom, the time element of how long it actually took to grow these mountains, if you will, and then erode them away to the present level. All the plate motions and all of the vertical motions are about as fast as your fingernails grow. And it gives you a better feeling for time.
Yeah, it's just slow process, but an enormous amount of time. And you can completely change the geography of the planet, can't you?
It can take billions of years, but geography can change in remarkable ways. These cliffs are the remnants of ancient seabeds, left on top of the bedrock by colliding continents. Deposited in layers over millions of years, the seabed was squeezed by great pressures, folded and buckled, sometimes driven deep into the earth, and sometimes piled up on top of it. But there are areas that escape the full impact of these events. Just north of Logan's Line, Anticosti Island in the Gulf of St. Lawrence narrowly avoided the full brunt of colliding tectonic plates. Its rocks have lain undisturbed for hundreds of millions of years. All along the island's edge, intact formations allow us a rare look at ancient seabeds, untouched by those continent-smashing forces. But the forces that shaped Appalachia are not a thing of the past. Even as the once giant mountains are worn down, they continue to create new instabilities.
When the continents collided, continental crust gets pushed up, but it also gets pushed down, and there develops a root to the continent right underneath a major mountain range. So as we're slowly eroding from the surface, taking the load off, it's floating in the mantle, and then it's buoying back up and rebounding. And so every little bit that it's moving up, there's the potential for earthquakes. And we do have minor earthquakes here from time to time.
Minor earthquakes, and occasionally quakes that are not so minor. Deep faults run through the rocky crust of eastern North America, a legacy of its violent birth, a heritage that is continuing to play itself out. It seems that every few hundred years, we get a reminder of how powerful these subterranean forces can be. The terrain near Quebec City was shaped by landslides produced by the massive quake of 1663. Some 300 years later, in 1886, an earthquake shattered Charleston, South Carolina. In 1 minute, much of the city was leveled. It's estimated more than 100 people killed. The quake was felt as far away as Boston to the north and Cuba to the south. That was at a time when the region was much less populated. Today, with most of the continent's inhabitants living within a few hundred kilometers of the Appalachians, an earthquake of similar size could be much more devastating. It wouldn't take a killer quake to wreak havoc with the infrastructure of cities like Boston, Toronto, New York, or Philadelphia. Along Logan's Line, where the Appalachians meet the Canadian Shield, geologists trying to predict the next major quake are studying ancient fault systems. Geologist Nick Isles has come here to meet with Stéphane Mazzotti of the Geological Survey of Canada. Stéphane's research may hold the key to understanding the earthquakes that threaten eastern North America.
Old Appalachian structures. Quite stunning, yeah. The structures that we see here are in fact quite important to the whole tectonic history of the region. So it's these same structures that become reactivated and produce earthquakes? That's right. So geologists often say we have to understand the present to interpret the past, but when you come to earthquakes, you really have to know a lot about the past, don't we, to interpret the present? Yeah, that's kind of critical, in fact, to have a good understanding of what the structures like that major fault here is, and how that relates to the deformation today, where the earthquakes are and why they actually happen where they do. Now, how far would these faults extend? They actually extend all the way along the St. Lawrence River from the mouth down to Montreal and probably farther down into the eastern and central U.S., as far as Memphis and the Mississippi River to some extent. And you've got some evidence that the rivers, that system's actually widening. That's right. We've been measuring deformation across the valley, and we have some evidence that it's actually shortening at very, very slow rates of the order of maybe 0.5 millimeter per year. But that very slow deformation is probably enough to drive the earthquakes that are recorded.
The line that divides the Appalachians from the Shield is exactly where Stéphane sets up his extremely precise GPS-based measuring equipment. With these tools, he can detect the minute movements of the tectonic plates. Around 200 million years ago, the Atlantic Ocean was created as Africa and North America gradually split apart once again. As North America moved westward, tectonic activity reactivated ancient fissures, and the New Madrid fault line was born, running along the Mississippi River. Many of our major rivers flow along similar fault zones. 75 years before Charleston, this area was hit by one of the continent's greatest quakes, many, many times more powerful than the famous 1906 San Francisco disaster. The town of New Madrid is located directly on the fault line. It's the perfect site for scientists like Marticia Tuttle, who are trying to understand and even to predict earthquakes.
I was taking a class in plate tectonics. Our professor was explaining what earthquakes can tell you about fault movement when the Morgan Hill earthquake struck. And it was really scary. You could hear the glassware down the hall clattering. It occurred to me that I could be buried alive in that classroom. That earthquake had a huge effect on me, and it changed my life.
Got to turn back around, Marcia?
Yeah, okay, yeah, so I have the features to look at.
Today, Marticia is flying over the New Madrid area, searching for clues that will help her estimate when we might face another monster earthquake.
These large light-colored patterns that we see in the soil look very much like sand blow deposits, which would be indicative of large earthquakes here in the recent past.
During an earthquake, violent tremors can cause layers of wet underground sand to shake until liquefaction occurs. Under strong pressure, the muddy sand works its way upward through cracks, gushing out as a sand blow. Marticia can use the organic material trapped in the sand blows to date when the events occurred.
All right, straighten up just a little bit, and the other direction.
The natural erosion provided by the river can expose otherwise hidden signs of sand blows.
So we're here doing river reconnaissance. We're looking for sand dikes and sand blows that would be exposed in the river cut banks. It allows us to look deeper in the geologic section than you can in a trench. And sometimes we can find older sand blows and sand blows that are buried and would not be visible at the surface. So keep your eyes open for those planar cracks. Well, this looks like a good exposure. Good eyes. Hey, it looks like we might have a sand blow. I want to see if there are any artifacts that occur close to this contact between the Native American occupation horizon below and the sandy layer, which looks very much like a sand blow above.
Can we use the artifacts close to the surface to date the material?
Yeah, we can, and we have done that at other sites. When an archaeologist is involved, they can give an estimate of the age of the artifacts. Here's a good size artifact. It's a ceramic piece of a Native American pot. It looks like we have a good opportunity to date this particular feature because of the artifacts, and also there's plenty of organics in that horizon, so it makes it so dark.
Marticia also explores the sand blows she spots from the air. Before she can dig them up, she needs to convince the landowner of the importance of her research.
Hello. Nice to know you, Marticia. I'm Ruth Dillahunty.
Oh, it's good to meet you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. I'm an earthquake geologist.
Uh-huh.
And I'm studying earthquake hazards here
Okay.
in the New Madrid seismic zone.
Well, we've got them right here.
Yeah. Figure out the
Well, of course,
earthquake
the
chronology.
1812, I don't know how you'd know much before that. It shook the whole world, didn't it?
Much of North America.
Yes.
It did.
Yes.
It looks
And
like...
that's part of the Pemiscot Bayou right there that, I guess, cracked open or...
Yeah, there are accounts of it blowing up in 1811, 1812.
And then they claimed that the Mississippi River ran backwards for 24
That's
hours.
right. Up near New Madrid.
Yeah.
Well, I think I may have found a sand blow on your property. And I came to see you to see if you might give me permission to study that feature and to excavate the sand blow.
I really appreciate you coming here. I'd love to see it happen on this ground. I really would. So, yes, I'm pleased to have you.
Marticia will excavate the site with the hope of being able to date the events that caused the sand blow.
We're going to excavate the trench out here. Combination of excitement and anxiety.
Until very recently, it was believed that major earthquakes occurred in this area every 2,000 years or so. Marticia is uncovering evidence that seems to say otherwise.
It's rare that we dig and not find sand blows and sand dikes. No sand dikes. Let's try a dig down here.
But it's proving to be slow going. Sometimes the sand dikes can be difficult to find.
Can you reach a little farther? Clean this with your bucket. Perhaps we should focus over here. We're going to keep looking. We do not have a sand blow here. I think we should perhaps move down there. Give it a try. Third time's the charm today. Yeah, I think, yes, indeed, it is a sand dike. This dike is oriented like this. So the main connection between the dike and this sand blow would have been about here.
These are clues to ancient seismic activity. Now Marticia will have to map out in painstaking detail every sign left by that event.
We've gridded the wall, and we're in the process of documenting the liquefaction features and their relationships to the host sediments. We'll end up with a very detailed drawing that shows the relationships of the contacts. And the other reason for doing it is it really forces us to look very carefully at the features and at the sediments. And we'll be looking for organic material such as pieces of tree branches or other organic material that we can do radiocarbon dating on. It helps us to understand how many large earthquakes occurred in a sequence. It helps us to better estimate the age of the prehistoric features. By studying sand blows all over the region here, we have figured out that there were prior New Madrid earthquake sequences. One around 1450 AD, one about 900 AD, possibly one around 300 AD, and another one around 2350 BC. And this would suggest an average repeat time for New Madrid sequences of 500 years.
A frequency of every 500 years, 4 times more often than anyone previously thought. Marticia is one of those scientists who are revolutionizing our understanding of the forces that cause earthquakes and the threat they pose. For millions of years, dense forests flourished here along ancient shores and vast wetlands. Then 300 million years ago, these tranquil scenes saw colliding continents that buried those organic materials deep underground. Over enormous periods of time, heat and pressure did their work, producing coal. In this part of Pennsylvania, the coal was unusually hard and clean burning, the king of coals, anthracite. Here was the fuel that powered the Industrial Revolution. To geologist Nick Isles of the University of Toronto, this landscape clearly shows not only how that coal was formed, but also how in turn our quest for coal has reshaped the landscape.
It's amazing how much the terrain and the landscape's been changed by mining. Almost every square inch has been turned over and dug, great piles of waste rock everywhere. What do you think is natural with trees growing out of it has been mined years ago. And then you go into another valley and where there's no coal and you've got natural landscapes, farms, just amazing.
The search for coal powered the efforts to understand more about how it was formed and where it could be found. As local expert Dan Curry is about to show Nick, mining often uncovered evidence of a geologic history that would otherwise have remained hidden deep underground.
So this is one of the best examples of folded rock anywhere in eastern North America, isn't it, Dan?
It's a great example of the mountain building events that took place millions of years ago.
It took the labor of armies of miners to strip away the rock and thick folded veins of coal that buried structures like this one. That fuel was burned long ago, but the hidden clues remain exposed.
So when this was flat, the surface we're standing on, there were trees growing up, deep swamps. And all that got compressed to form really hard anthracite.
It really does show how complex the geology is and how tight some of these folds are.
We see rocks that have been buckled down and rocks here that have been buckled up.
It's a great example of how the geology in this area has been folded from tectonic activity.
An important point is they didn't form here, did they? They formed under maybe 5 miles of rocks under great temperature, pressure. And then the next stage is we've lost all that 5 miles of rock by erosion.
Right,
we've got 250 million year old rock exposed at the surface with structures that also formed at great depth exposed.
The hills of the region are peppered with tunnels and shafts, a maze of earthworks that runs under countryside, towns, and cities. Many of the older mines are long closed. This one has been reopened as a museum. For guide David Cutchin, working in the mines was a family tradition for generations.
We're really going back in time, aren't we? Because we're not only going into rocks which are 250 million years old, but this is the way the mining industry used to be, underground.
This is the way it was, yes, indeed. Some of this tunnel is the original tunnel, hand dug back in 1855. And the first time they hit the coal was 1858. Took 2 years before they got to the coal.
This is a drift mine. The tunnel Nick is traveling along cuts almost horizontally into the hillside. Vertical shafts connect it to similar ones above and below.
So we're cutting across coal seams as we go in, pretty much horizontal. We're cutting across coal seams that are very steeply dipping.
This is called a drift mine. We go through about a dozen veins of coal, give or take. This here level is the water level, which drains all the water from this level to the surface. And anywhere down below had to be pumped out.
How many people would have been working in a mine this size? Are there many mines along the valley? How many in a mine like this?
This particular mine, in their heyday, the biggest amount was 600 people.
All those skills, all that expertise of mining underground, all that knowledge is slowly going, isn't it?
Yep, it's all going by the way like the dinosaurs.
Miners would dig these horizontal shafts through the bedrock until they ran into one of the large coal seams that snaked through the countryside. It might take years to reach that point, and then the real work would begin. Men came from all over the world for a chance to work in the mines, mines that were powering the Industrial Revolution and building the modern world.
See, here's the top rock, bottom rock, right ahead of us here.
The economy of the region is still based on coal mining, but it's a very different enterprise than it was. It took generations to drive the tunnels that riddle these hills. Today, entire mountains are moved to get at the treasure beneath.
This is a new industry.
It's actually an old industry reinventing itself.
So they've removed the whole of this mountainside. So before this operation started, these trees went all the way across the valley.
Correct. It's the main way the coal's extracted in the anthracite region.
So it's very efficient in one way because they've removed entirely the coal along this entire surface, which goes for many tens of miles.
Yes.
But they've got a tremendous amount of waste to move as well. That's very inefficient in that way, isn't it?
Yes, they move a tremendous amount of material just to get to the coal. The economics of it are depending on many factors, on the thickness of the coal and how much burden you have to move to get to the coal.
But whereas there would have been several hundred men working underground previously, you've now got a couple of dump truck operators, crane operators.
Yeah, a mine which may have employed 2,000 or 3,000 people is now reduced to maybe 10 people or 15 people. The first generation of mining back in the 1800s was through underground mine methods. And you can see the various tunnels on the rock where the deep miners tunneled through what was a layer of coal at the time.
And there was almost an underground city of people working underground, coming in from the valley along these narrow little tunnels.
Very dangerous conditions. Many of the men paid the price for it.
You know, in the earlier days, it was get the coal out. Safety wasn't too much of an issue because the amazing part of it, they valued a mule more than they did a human. If an early immigrant got killed in a mine, no big deal because you had 10 more waiting out in the street for his job. But if you lost the mule, let's put it this way, they had more tears shed for that mule than that miner. And from 1869 to 1950, over 30,000 anthracite, now we're talking anthracite miners, died in the mine, died from injuries.
The modern world was built at a terrible human cost, but there was also a cost to the rest of nature. It's another aspect of the Appalachian legacy.
So Dan, why is the water so red?
It's principally because of the water coming in contact with pyrite. When these coals were formed, they were formed in a backwater, sort of swampy, boggy environment. And there was a lot of bacteria and decomposition. There was a lot of sulfur. You had a lot of pyrites forming, which is an iron and sulfur mixed. As the water comes out and encounters the air, the iron hydroxides that are in the water, which is essentially like rust, starts to accumulate on the stream bottom, and it really chokes the aquatic life, pretty much from the bottom of the food chain up.
So this affects all the wildlife that would normally be in a natural river?
And sometimes for 30 or 40 miles.
Yeah, a lot of the rivers around here are that color, aren't they? So it's a pretty regional problem.
The search for coal led to many discoveries about Appalachia and the Earth's geology in general. But it's not just about coal. No surprise, really, when you consider that this diverse and complex range runs from the Atlantic Ocean to almost the geographic heart of the continent. In the dramatic rock record of the Appalachian Mountains is written the long, slow evolution of the continent. The destruction of ancient oceans and the creation of new ones have radically changed our planet's geography. In the folds and faults of these rocks, scientists have succeeded in identifying the cycles of these massive collisions. The process that slowly but surely reshaped our past also shapes our present, sometimes violently, as earthquakes. Over the next 250 million years, the slow movements of the continents will gradually bring them together to once again form a single supercontinent. Mountains, once the metaphor for permanence and strength, will be gone. Oceans eternal will be swept away to be replaced by new oceans. It's just geology.